Tyler, I got to ask, did you wear crimson and cream on purpose?
Because we're going to funny. I wore this. I did a VSiN hit earlier this morning, and they asked me if it was for Indiana, and I had to remind them I'm a Buckeye, so I just pretend it's scarlet. I don't think it actually is, though.
Well, so it would have to be candy striped if it were Indiana, so that would be the tell. But I ask because we're going to talk Ole Miss at Oklahoma, and this is one of those pre-elimination games. There's a couple of them this week. You got Ole Miss, Oklahoma, and Vandy, Missouri, where you have a one-loss team versus a one-loss team, teams with very high expectations, teams that want to make the college football playoff, that feel like they have the resources and the roster to make the college football playoff. But if you lose this week, you are behind the eight ball. And this is a really interesting game. It opened, I believe, Oklahoma -4.5 and has now gone up to Oklahoma -5.5.
Yeah, you kind of made my first point for me, is that the market is in agreement here on Oklahoma moving the line already a point here. I projected Oklahoma -6.5, and we're at the point in the season where I don't have any preseason priors baked into my projections now. Everything is on field only, opponent adjusted, what you've done on the field this year. So I've got Oklahoma -6.5. Now, the good thing about being at this point in the season is now these teams have played so many games. Now I can not only look at just the on-field data, but I can also look at, okay, just in your last 3 games, how are these teams trending? And that's how I try to get ahead of the market, is like, look at their total body of work and then look at the last 3 games, how these teams are trending. And I actually would have Oklahoma -8.5 looking at their last 3 games. So all the signals that I'm looking at here point me in Oklahoma, plus, something you can't really quantify, but something I absolutely took into account. And I think I've talked about this on the show before. Teams the week after, they have to play Ohio State, Bama, Georgia, those type of teams. There's a physical toll that it takes, and there's a mental toll that it takes, especially with the way the game went at Georgia last week. Ole Miss probably feels like they should have won that game. So that's, as an athlete, I've been in that spot where you feel like you outplay the other team, but you still lose. That's pretty deflating. And now you got to go on the road to Oklahoma playing one of the top 3 defenses in the country. I think that's a really tough task for Lane Kiffin's team here this week.
The thing that stands out to me about the last 3 games is that the last 3 games, Oklahoma's worst game of the season is a part of that group.
Right.
Even with the worst game that they played this year against Texas and Dallas, the numbers bear it out that way. And what specifically are you looking at when you look at the data from the last 3 games? Like, what is it calculating so people understand?
So it basically each game that a team plays gets like what I call like a TSI game grade, which goes into your power rating. Like, your power rating is just your average of all of those game grades, essentially. So it's an opponent adjusted kind of game grade. So the game grades over the last 3 games, favor Oklahoma even more so than the total body of work, which has obviously been impressive so far for Oklahoma.
It's just it's amazing to me, like how the Texas game can be in there. And this is still how this comes out, because I look at these teams and it's like, okay, I get where you're worried about Ole Miss's defense, but I also worry about Oklahoma's scoring, because we saw them against Texas and they struggled.
Yeah, I mean that's a fair point. I would say that Texas. I know Texas is not what we thought it was going to be, but that's mostly an offensive conversation. I think the Texas defense is, for the most part, what we thought it was going to be. I think by most metrics, they're top 3, top 5 in the country. So I don't think I would look at what they did against the Texas defense and think, well, Ole Miss is going to be able to do that to them also, because Ole Miss's defense is not the caliber of defense that Texas's is.
What I think is the actual enlightening discussion about this is what that says about Ole Miss, because Ole Miss is a 1-loss team. They were in the top 5 last week. And if you go look at their resume, zooming out, they beat an Arkansas team that Notre Dame won by like 9,000 points against by 6. Their best win of the season is LSU at home. They won by 5, and LSU is kind of heading in the wrong direction. And then, of course, the Georgia game. Now, I think they probably should have won or could have won that Georgia game, but I'm not sure that we're 100% all the way there with Georgia either. It's like, is Ole Miss off to a good start record-wise, but not actually as good as we may perceive? And like, is the math telling us that before we see it with our own eyes?
Yeah, I mean, I think they are good. I don't think, we were talking before the show here when you talked with Doug and Bill yesterday about who can win the national championship. I don't think Ole Miss is in that tier. I've got them power rated 18th right now. I've got them about a half point behind like Missouri, Texas, Michigan, those type of teams. So I don't think they're like a true contender. I think they're a really solid team, but I don't think they're like in that upper echelon of college football this year.
This is going to be fascinating. Also, you may be wearing you're not wearing Nebraska red because I know we're going to go with this, but I want to move to the Big Ten. Northwestern heads to Nebraska. Nebraska coming off getting just drilled by Minnesota, but Nebraska is a 7.5 point favorite. Northwestern, we've seen them beat Penn State. The win against UCLA looking better and better, and David Braun looking like he's doing a pretty good job there in a year that didn't start off looking so great. What do you think happens here?
Yeah, I'm on Northwestern here. I bet Nebraska last week. We talked before. My numbers coming into the season were lower on Nebraska. They kind of caught up and were then pretty high on Nebraska with the way they started the season, but they just have not been as good lately. I mean, they were never in the game with Minnesota, and we saw Ohio State shove Minnesota in the locker for 4 quarters or 3.5 quarters a few weeks ago and just made them look like an FCS team. So the fact that Nebraska just showed up and got rolled by Minnesota has me a little concerned. And, I'm not a big like narrative guy when it comes to this stuff, but I do wonder how much the Penn State Matt Rule stuff is swirling around there and is impacting their preparation perhaps. Again, that's something you can't quantify, but when the numbers point me in a direction and I kind of feel like the vibes, as we say, kind of match that, I like this play. Over the last 3 games, I would actually make Northwestern a huge favorite. They're surging right now. They're playing much better football than Nebraska is over the last 3 games.
Yeah, if you are right about this and Northwestern somehow wins outright, it's going to be full-on meltdown mode in Lincoln.
Yeah, no doubt.
I was on a podcast this week in Omaha, and we were talking about the Minnesota game, and they were very depressed. Like if it turns into a 2-game stretch like this, that would be total rock bottom. And like I've watched Northwestern play this year, and they don't seem dysfunctional. They don't seem talented. They seem slower. They seem like what you would think Northwestern would seem like outside of the crazy Pat Fitzgerald era teams, but they seem like a functional team.
Yeah, and I mean, obviously, when you're talking about betting an underdog against going to Nebraska, which isn't an easy place to play, like obviously you want to back a team that you feel like at least is capable of making the plays necessary to keep the game close. And this is a low total. Both these teams, they're not going to like chuck it all over the yard and light up the scoreboard by any means. So if we got a low total game with teams trending in the opposite direction, I'll gladly take the dog here at above a touchdown.
What is it about Nebraska? Is there's a particular stat or two that you use in your index that you've seen the last 3 games that particularly troubles you?
There's not. I'd have to dive into the numbers. That's why I make my nice round offensive and defensive ratings just for quick reference. I'd have to dive into the weeds there. But I mean, even just the eye test, because I was on Nebraska last week against Minnesota, so I watched that game, invested, and was just like, what? I mean, as Ari knows, like that's one of those games. Like halfway through the first quarter, is like, well, we just set money on fire because this.
As Ari knows,
this has no chance.
Ari knows. Ari wasn't watching that game because Ari was knee deep in a Miami lost column. And I go off the deep end a little bit, and I chased Miami when they were down 14-0, and I was writing a column about that. But I was like checking in. I was like, what the hell is going on over here? Yeah, it is interesting because Nebraska was hot, and now they're not. And it happened very quickly. And it seemed to happen right around the time that the Penn State job came open. And I know that's completely speculative and all like conjecture, but it is definitely a trend.
Yeah, I thought it was very just coincidental that like the week that stuff starts to surface is their worst game of the season. So, that is definitely, I have an eyebrow raised. Again, I wouldn't just bet based just off of that, of course. But the fact that the number points me in that direction and that stuff's kind of going on at the same time is kind of alarming.
So, Tyler, one of the other games I know you want to talk about is San Diego State going to Fresno State. San Diego State is in a weird place. Like they have this odd loss at Washington State early. Then they crush Cal 34-0. Then they beat Northern Illinois 6-3. Like it's the strangest
strangest 3-game stretch you could see.
Scoring profile I've ever seen for a team. But they seem to have settled in nicely with the wins against Colorado State and Nevada. What do you like about Sean Lewis's team?
Yeah, this number is crazy. So the number has been bet up to 3 from 2.5 earlier in the week. I make it San Diego State minus 17.
Oh
so
my God.
I'm showing
What
a lot of
what do they know? Is there going to be a press conference about this?
Yeah, apparently, yeah. So I'm suspicious as to like why I have such a huge discrepancy, because you normally don't see that. But again, I think where this is coming from is, as I've talked about before, odds makers still do have their preseason priors baked in. And just for quick reference, I looked before the season, I would have made Fresno State an 11.5 point favorite in this game. But based on what they've done on the field, that's now flipped 28 points. So I think that's where the kind of the line's coming in, because preseason Fresno minus 11.5. Now I've got San Diego State minus 17. San Diego State minus 3 somewhere in the middle. So that I guess kind of explains it and makes sense.
Any of these games that we're talking about today, and we're talking about a bunch of them, download the Game Time app, redeem the code STAPLES, get $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply, of course, but you can go to any college football game or NFL game or any game or comedy show or concert with Game Time. They have tickets to everything. And right now, the tickets in Bloomington, kind of hot for that UCLA game. The tickets in Baton Rouge for that Texas A&M LSU game, not as expensive as you'd think. Go to GameTime.com, especially if you're trying to decide at the last minute if you want to go to a game. Hitting Game Time on Saturday morning is the way to go, because you can see some very interesting price movements the day of the game. So if you go to Game Time, use the code STAPLES, $20 off your first purchase. The price you see is the price you pay. No hidden fees, no BS. Game Time, swipe, tap, ticket, go.
What jumps out to me with San Diego State is like the totals of their games. I know this isn't a totals bet, but like they've had some totals, going under, like you mentioned, the Northern Illinois game totals 9 points. And then they've had other games, where they're in the 40s, 50s, like they're just kind of all over the place, but they've shown they can win multiple ways, which, again, when you're backing a favorite, that's, kind of something nice you want to have in your pocket, that they can adapt and win, kind of however the game dictates the flow is going to go.
Tyler, before I go cash out my daughter's 529 plan and put it on San Diego State, I just was wondering, there have been times in the past, though, where you have had pretty big discrepancies like this, right? Mm-hmm. And when you have discrepancies, do you feel like there's added juice to those games? Like, is this your favorite play of the week, or do you like go into it cautiously optimistic?
I would say more cautiously optimistic. I think you still have to respect the betting market. I'm not pompous enough to think that like they're just completely wrong and like there's no way it could go that way, and San Diego State's like for sure going to blow them out. I just look at the trends in the data, and again, I make it 17. The last 3 games, I'd make it San Diego State minus 22. So the data is trending heavily towards San Diego State. So projecting that out, like if this is a San Diego State blowout, I'm not going to be surprised. But also, if it's, a sweat in the fourth quarter and they win by 7, I also won't be surprised by that either.
So Michigan fans will remember Jaden Denegal, who is now San Diego State's quarterback. He was with the Wolverines out of high school, and obviously was part of the purge of quarterbacks to get where they are now. But I do want you guys to know, you know what their leading rusher's name is, right?
No.
Lucky Sutton.
All name
You're
team.
fucking lucky here, guys.
Lucky Sutton.
Oh, Tyler, I do have. Go ahead.
I'm trying to think of like where that would land on like good college names, and I like the sexual ones better.
Lucky's pretty good, but Tyler, I do have to ask you. Getting back to your Ole Miss Oklahoma pick, did anyone in Gainesville, Florida, contact you this week? Just curious.
they did not as of yet. Now, my brother is a big Florida fan, so I'm on alert for that. But no,
this like whole idea
they are wishing for they want Ole Miss to lose exactly 3 games this season. They want to be good, but not too good.
Yeah, I love that idea of like, Well, they need him to lose because then that opens things up and makes
Right.
the transition cleaner. But if he misses the playoff to make that transition cleaner, then he's no longer like is accomplished. So like it's like I don't know like why you would want that, but it is kind of a funny thing. Tyler, I wanted to ask you one thing. When or why do you remove your preseason priors in week 9, and why do the books not? And like, do you do it at the same time every year, or how do you make that judgment call on your numbers?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. And honestly, it's kind of year to year. I just kind of see how it's going because each week of the season, I'm kind of testing. I put out my official TSI numbers, but then I'm also testing other formulas, weighing the more recent games more or less, and those type of things. And this season, it seemed to me that the trends of the more recent games and the on-field data was outperforming the formulas with the priors baked in. So I felt good getting to this midpoint of the season before I pulled him out, and it's a gradual regression, obviously up to that point. It's not just cold turkey, but I did feel like now was the time to pull the preseason priors out because of how the formulas have performed against each other.
I'm going to put you on the spot here. You don't have to have an answer, but it is Thursday. This show will be running Thursday. Do we got to play for Thursday Night Football? He does NFL too, guys.
Thursday Night Football. I took the Chargers -3. I would lean under in that game as well, and I'll probably have a little bit on South Alabama -6.5 in the college game.
Electric.
Testy Jim Harbaugh is always a dangerous Jim Harbaugh. That's right, Tyler. Tyler Shoemaker, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks, guys.